This evening is a very special evening in the Japanese Buddhist world because December 7th is the evening of the enlightenment of the Buddha, the day that the enlightenment of the Buddha is celebrated, December 8th. So happy Bodhi Day. And I feel like this koan that I'll share with you this evening is very appropriate to the enlightenment, celebrating the enlightenment of the Buddha. Bodhidharma is so central to the Zen tradition. So I'd like to read the whole koan and then kind of break it down. Bodhidharma's vast emptiness. Preface to the assembly. Benka's 3 offerings did not prevent his being punished. If a luminous jewel were thrown at them, few are the men or women who would not draw their swords. For an impromptu guest, there is an impromptu host. He's provisionally accepted, but not absolutely acceptable. If you can't grasp rare, valuable treasure, let's toss in a dead cat's head and see. The main case. Attention. Emperor Wu of Liang asked the great teacher Bodhidharma, what is the highest meaning of the holy truths of Buddhism? Bodhidharma replied, vast emptiness, no holiness. The emperor asked, who stands here before me? Bodhidharma replied, I don't know. The emperor was baffled. Thereafter, Bodhidharma crossed the river, arrived at Shaolin Temple, and faced the wall for 9 years. Okay, that's the case. That's the case. Let's look into this a little bit more closely. The first line of the preface reads, Benka's 3 offerings did not prevent his being punished. So we don't know very much about Benka here or the offerings that he made just by reading this one sentence. But I think this sentence, even without very much context, gives us a hint at a central teaching of Buddhism. So we think if we do good things, we're going to get some reward, right? That's Benka's 3 offerings. He made some kind of generous offering, and yet still he got punished. Sometimes the reverse happens though, and we wonder why, right? We wonder, why didn't I put this effort in, I didn't get something back. And this whole case circles around our human tendency to think we'll be rewarded for our good behavior. It doesn't always happen though, does it? And this case points to the limited view of seeing things in this kind of black and white, right and wrong, good and bad way. Things are not that simple when it comes to what we call the ultimate dimension. So in Buddhism, we talk about the 2 truths, the ultimate truth and the relative truth. And this koan is pointing to the reality of the ultimate dimension, ultimate truth. Attention, main case. Emperor Wu of Liang asked the great teacher Bodhidharma, what is the ultimate meaning of the holy truth of Buddhism? What is it? He wants to know. Well, look at, who was this Emperor Wu? Why would an emperor be asking a Zen teacher about this? Bodhidharma replied, vast emptiness, no holiness. There's nothing holy. What does this mean? What does this mean? No holiness. The emperor asks, who stands before me? So the emperor wants to know, does he really have the right person? Is this the great master Bodhidharma that he's been told about? And if he's so great, why would he say there's nothing holy? I'm sure there's got to be something holy. See, the emperor is creating, or he's living out of a dualistic way of thinking. There is something holy, and that means there's something not holy. Right? So he's questioning, not now he's beginning to doubt the person who gives him this answer. He's beginning to doubt whether Bodhidharma is who he says he is. Could he possibly be an imposter? The emperor himself, he thought he'd been doing very holy deeds. He had supported assiduously the Buddhist Sangha. And he wanted to know what his merit was for doing that. Listen to this, a little bit of history about Emperor Wu. Buddhist Emperor Liang Wu Di. His years are 502 to 549 of the current era, CE. So respected the Sangha that he ceded the responsibilities of governance to the monks and nuns, much to the dismay of officials who were more inclined toward Confucianism. The emperor was perceived to be too lenient in his punishment of convicted criminals. And this perhaps might be due to his study and practice of Buddhism, the practice of not killing. And particularly idiosyncratic when, in an effort to raise funds for the monastic community, the emperor presented himself to a temple as a simple monk and refused to leave until the palace had paid a very costly ransom. That was his way of raising funds. Emperor Wu was such an ardent Buddhist that he abolished all Taoist temples in 517 and returned all Taoist priests, men and women, to lay life. So he was not, he was somewhat antagonistic, very antagonistic to Taoism, even though there's very much a deep connection between Buddhism and Taoism. At this time, he didn't see it. And this is based in a book I have on world religions by Roy Moore and others. So Emperor Wu thought he had a deep understanding of Buddhism, but according to this koan, Bodhidharma pushes him to think a little bit more deeply. Bodhidharma replies, I don't know, when the emperor asks him, who are you? This is, he takes it, Bodhidharma takes it a little bit further. Emperor Wu asks again, he's like trying to get at some deep truth. And Bodhidharma serves him up another really deep truth. I don't know. And he says this, Bodhidharma says this to an emperor. Now consider this, that Chinese Buddhist monks refused to bow to emperors. That was unheard of, especially in Confucian way of thinking. The emperor, that's the highest person on that rung. And it was expected that if you were lower than the emperor would receive your graciousness. But the Chinese Buddhist monks did not bow to the emperor. And so with great confidence, Bodhidharma replies, I don't know, directly to the emperor. He sees the emperor and himself inter-are. They're not two separate people. It's not the emperor above him and Bodhidharma below him. The emperor and Bodhidharma are inter-be. The emperor was baffled by this response. Thereafter, Bodhidharma crossed the river, arrived at Shaolin Temple, and faced the wall for 9 years. So this I don't know of Bodhidharma points to the limits of defining ourself, points to the boundless nature of this body-mind. How can we say we know for sure who we are, all of who we are? Are we a name, right? Daishin is just a label. You can peel it off. Who is this? And you can ask that question of yourself. Emperor Wu didn't get this, even though he was a devout Buddhist. And here's a poem, kind of a saving grace for Emperor Wu. This poem is attributed to him. Don't know if he actually wrote it or not, but after his meeting with Bodhidharma. I don't know how much after, but he writes, I saw him without seeing, met him without meeting him. Now, as of old, I regret and lament this. So this is kind of a confession of Emperor Wu. I wasn't seeing deeply enough when I met this Buddhist master from India. So I want to bring us back to last week. We looked at the first koan of the Shoyo Roku. And this first koan pointed to silent meditation, if you can remember. The Buddha simply sits and then gets down from his seat. And this practice is really the foundation of Zen practice. But the second koan of the Shoyo Roku pushes us to practice a little bit deeper. And so the first koan is about the Buddha. The second koan is about the first ancestor in China. Actually, the 28th ancestor between the Buddha and Bodhidharma. There's 20, so Bodhidharma is the 28th ancestor. So there's been 27 generations of teacher, student, teacher, student, teacher, student. There's 1,000 years between the Buddha and Bodhidharma. And Bodhidharma is the one supposedly credited with bringing Buddhism from India to China. What happened between Buddha and Bodhidharma, right? These two koans are not necessarily historically placed. There's a huge gap of 1,000 years between these two masters. There is, in the Zen school, there is, however, another book called the Denko Roku, which means the transmission of light. And this has to do with the enlightenment experiences, the stories of enlightenment from one generation of teacher to student, teacher to student, student to teacher, all the way up to the present time. And that kind of fills in the gap between the Buddha and Bodhidharma. However, I would like you to think that there is also some continuity between this first koan of the Shoyo Roku, of the Buddha just sitting, and the second koan of the Shoyo Roku. So the first koan establishes the practice of Zazen. The second case makes it clear that if we think Zazen is something special, we're totally wrong. Bodhidharma makes it clear that there's nothing holy, including meditation. Yet if we are honest, we make our meditation out to be something special, something that we do that's somehow set apart, better than something else that we do. The second case references a sutra called the Heroic March. Quote, if you create an understanding of holiness, you will succumb to all errors. Right? And if we're totally honest, we do that. So this is kind of an admonition not to make your Zazen into something holy, a special trip, somehow different from the rest of your life. Be careful about that point. And this is not an easy thing to do, because several centuries of yogis, of Buddhist practitioners have done exactly that, made their meditation practice into something holy. So here's a departure from that kind of thinking. What does it look like? What might it look like to not allow your Zen practice to be something holy that you do? Everything is holy. Folding the laundry is holy practice. Brushing your teeth is holy practice. Preparing food to eat is holy. Taking care of your family is also a holy practice. All of those things are holy, equal to Zazen. So be careful about dichotomizing your practice into this is practice over here and this is not practice. Don't make it into a special thing. That's what I think this koan is kind of asking us to think about. And lest we think we don't need Zazen based on this nothing holy response, the case concludes with Bodhidharma going to Shorinji Temple in a cave monastery, and continuing to sit in meditation for the next 9 years. So if you think that, oh, okay, then I don't need to meditate to find holiness, actually, well, Bodhidharma continues his practice. And this point is also found in Zen Master Dogen's Fukan Zazengi, written another about 800 years later in his instructions for meditation. He writes, Dogen writes, consider the Buddha, although he was wise at birth, the traces of his 6 years of upright sitting can yet be seen. As for Bodhidharma, although he had received the mind seal, his 9 years of facing a wall is celebrated still. If even the ancient sages were like this, how can we today dispense with wholehearted practice? So Bodhidharma had already been practicing with his teacher some 30 years prior to be asked to go to China. He was already an old man when he came to China. And after the meeting with the emperor, he goes into a temple and faces a wall for the next 9 years, sitting meditation. This wall facing is our Soto tradition, turning our backs to the world and sit facing the wall. Just like Bodhidharma, that's where it comes from. When we sit facing the wall, we are replicating Bodhidharma's practice. So this koan, to conclude here, this koan case extends the first koan in Shoyoroku. It helps us get unstuck from the narrow view that Zazen is all that it is. And it brings us to the practice of our everyday life and encourages us to sit. It encourages us to sit without gaining mind. All right. Thank you.